I'd like to start the story with Waleed, who is an impoverished Arab that basically lives in a land of sand. And also, way across the other side of the planet is C.R.A.C.K, and he may live in Singapore or China, maybe Japan, I don't know, but he's Oriental. And C.R.A.C.K makes stuff that's sold at Walmart, whatever, plastic things, knickknacks. He works his butt off and he sells it cheap, and Americans buy it, and the money goes to C.R.A.C.K. And when America goes to the shopping center or to Walmart to buy the stuff, or when they go to work to get the money, they gas up their cars with gasoline. And it so happens that Waleed, that lived in the land of sand, was sitting on top of a big pool of petroleum, which gets refined into gasoline. And so, Waleed has money and C.R.A.C.K has money. They loan us the money. Believe it or not, these people are wanting to put their money to work. They don't just sit on it. They don't put it under the mattress. They invest it. And they show up at Citigroup Bank. And Citigroup has branches all over the world. Citigroup is an investment bank. They sell securities, meaning like contracts you buy and you get paid over time, like a bond, like a savings bond, or or like a stock that pays dividends. You buy a stock for $10, and once or twice, maybe 4 times a year, the issuer of that stock gives you a few pennies. If you have millions of dollars worth invested in these stocks, within the issuer sends you a few $1,000s from time to time, and it goes on, for years and years into the future. Your money is working for you. You're an investor. Some would say, no, you're not an investor, you're a speculator. Well, I say he's an investor, because he didn't have to buy the stocks or the bonds or the mortgage-backed securities. He could have put his money anywhere. He could have done anything with his money that he thought would generate him a return. He could have built a factory. He could have cultivated the land and produced oranges and sold the oranges. Well, you're a speculator. No, I'm not a speculator. I'm a farmer. I grow oranges. Well, farming is a risky business. You can't count on the weather, and besides, bugs may get you, the frost may get you. Who knows what? You're a speculator. Every businessman is a risk taker. You can call him a speculator, investor, whatever, but that's the way it is. Okay, the housing lending crisis. Where did we get the money that we used to buy houses, and then we extracted the equity from our houses and paid for the junk that we bought at Walmart on our credit cards? Where'd that money come from? It came from Waleed and C.R.A.C.K. Where'd they get the money? They got it from us because we bought the oil, the petroleum, and the trinkets from Walmart. Alright, the bank and Fannie Mae and the investment bank, your local bank and Fannie Mae and the investment bank, like Citigroup, act as middlemen, and they're basically sending money from Waleed and sending money back to Waleed. When your neighbor bought that new house a couple years ago, It turns out that the money was loaned to him. He thought he got it from the bank, but it really came from Waleed and Charlie Chong. And the reason I can prove it is because let's watch and see where the money goes when your neighbor makes his payment. Fannie Mae bought that mortgage from the bank and gave them money. The bank has the money. They gave it to the buyer of the house, and the buyer passed it on to the builder of the house. The builder got the money. And remember now, it came from Waleed and Charlie Chong. And now Waleed and Charlie Chong are wanting to get the money back with some profit on top of it. When your neighbor defaulted, then ultimately somebody was left promising Charlie Chong and Waleed some money, and the money was not flowing up the pipeline. To use technical terms, the credit market froze. It froze, meaning there wasn't nobody paying no money into it. It dried up. I would say it dried up rather than froze. Well, it froze if Waleed does not lend any more money, then it froze. So long as Waleed is willing to lend and Charlie Chong is willing to lend, well then the credit market is not frozen. But at this point, it's not frozen, it's just dried up because your neighbor is not paying his house payments. And the bank, somebody, somewhere in the banking system, I don't know who, tells him, well, get out, you're evicted. And a sign goes up in the front yard, foreclosed. And the contractor who built that house drives past and sees the house with a foreclosure sign. Well, he thinks, well, they didn't pay. They didn't make their payments. But I got money. I got my money, and I used it. I used that money partly to build a second house, and I had to pay my crew and buy the materials. And you ask that guy, well, that house you first built is foreclosed and vacant. How about this second house you built? And he would say, well, that second house didn't sell because I couldn't find a buyer. It's vacant. Both the houses I built are vacant. One's foreclosed and one never sold. And weeds are growing up in the yards and the paint's peeling. And I wonder who's going to maintain this property. You begin to wonder, well, who's at fault? Is this life? Is this life? Or did somebody, politicians, regulators, somewhere that should be regulating the banks and the flow of money and so on? And people say, oh, it's the Fed, it's the Fed. And that's where we are right now. I'm not so sure it's the Fed. I suspect that it is the politician who made laws that forced the bank to loan the money to your neighbor, even though your neighbor was a high risk, couldn't pay it back. If your neighbor had been a good risk, if your neighbor had been very creditworthy, nothing would have gone wrong. The bank would not have willingly loaned money to your neighbor unless they were either assured that he would pay or they were forced legally to loan money to your neighbor because your neighbor had purple skin, or because he was tall, or because he was of Eskimo extraction. Believe it or not, our federal government actually did make laws. Bill Clinton's signature is on one executive order signed in 1993 that says the bank will loan on the basis of race. Eskimo gets loans, and if you don't make a certain number of loans to Eskimos and to tall people and to purple people, we're going to hit you with penalties. We're going to hit you with big penalties. You pay, you go out of business, we shut you down. Or if you don't loan the money, you're going to give us huge bucks, and we're going to give the huge money after we take our cut to the tall people, the purple people, and the Eskimos. So the banks loan the money to people who are not going to pay. Tall people don't pay. Purple people have trouble paying. And Eskimos, you can be pretty well sure they're not going to pay.